Hi, everyone. My name is Denise Karkos. I'm a class of 93 graduate. I captained the 92-93 soccer team. We were the building years. We did not win the national championship, but my freshmen did. So I also say, thank God I got into Notre Dame when I did, because I would not have gotten in a couple of years later. So congratulations to any former student athletes here. It only got harder year after year. So I'm currently the Chief Marketing Officer of SiriusXM and Pandora. So we also just recently bought Stitcher, the podcast company. So we are the leader in audio entertainment. So my job is to understand each brand's target audience, how to attract more of them, how to retain them, how to grow listening, how to kick Spotify's butt, who you probably all listen to, but that's okay. Most people listen to 4 different audio services, so I hope that either SiriusXM or Pandora will be in the portfolio at some point. And just briefly, I am a 28-year marketer right out of college, just got right into it, and we could talk a little bit about the journey later, but just have been on the path ever since I graduated and loving it. So looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks so much, Denise. Christina, do you mind just introducing yourselves? And I jumped right to Denise before having James and Matt say a few words. So how about we have Christina say a little bit, and then we'll have James and Matt talk right after Christina.
Sure. Well, Denise didn't mention that she was also 2019 CMO of the Year from Ad Age, which is a huge publication in the marketing industry. So,
very sweet.
Besides being a CMO, she's a superstar CMO as well. And it's funny, we are just connecting now for the first time after all these years. I work at NBC Universal, and my teams have worked with Denise in her previous job. And actually, Denise, when you go back to the office, we'll talk about that. Or are you in 1221?
Yeah, we're in the same building.
We're in the same building too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll have to get together sometime if I ever go back, and we'll talk about that too. I don't know if that I'll ever go back into the same, but we'll see. So I currently am at NBC, NBC Universal. I've been there for 7 years. Prior to that, I had a first career in technology. Didn't love it, went back to get my MBA because I always wanted to be in sports. I got into sports marketing and realized actually it was the marketing that I loved about it. And so I stayed in entertainment, but always in the marketing space. So I was in sports, then music, then radio. I worked at Infinity for a little while before at Viacom. So I worked at Infinity in the radio group for a year, and then Viacom corporate strategy. I then launched Rock Band and Dance Central as video games, and then became CMO of a video game company, and then came back into media and I oversaw integrated marketing for all of our news properties at NBC, the Today Show, Nightly News, Meet the Press, MSNBC, and CNBC, which is where my path with Denise crossed when she was at the financial company Ameritrade. And then right before COVID hit, I started a new role overseeing our Center of Excellence. And so I am in charge of transformation and productivity as our organ. We didn't realize that our organization was going to transform as quickly as it did this year. Democratization of information, getting on enterprise systems so we could all kind of work as one, and training and development.
Thanks so much, Christina. Matt, you want to jump in?
Sure, and I'll be brief because I want to hear from our panelists. But on behalf of the Monogram Club, thanks to Denise and to Christina for carving out an hour for us. We always appreciate the opportunities, whether it's a home football weekend or spring game weekend, whatever it might be, to do these kind of things in person. Kind of the roundtable networking lunches that we've done in the Monogram room. This is the COVID version of that, but we're kind of finding our groove. I think everybody's operating in this environment. So thank you guys. Certainly want to get you guys back to South Bend soon. To our student athletes, thank you guys. You could be spending an hour, Netflix or whatever it might be tonight, but you showed up in an effort to get better and to kind of learn from a couple of individuals who are ahead of you in the career path and that journey beyond Notre Dame. So on behalf of the club, our staff, our board of directors, thank you all. I really appreciate the partnership with the Center for Career Development, with Lyndon, with James, any opportunity to bring together our Monogram winners with our current student athletes going through that process, right? That's win-win in our book for sure. So I hope this is conversational tonight. I think you'll get to know the personality of these two, and Brooks, if he's able to join, they're open books, right? And to get as much as you can out of this session, and don't let it last just this hour, right? Let's keep the connection going beyond this and all the networking we talk about. I know it's cliche, but it's real. No network stronger than the Notre Dame network, and especially with the unique bond that Monogram winners do have. So that's what we're about, and we certainly appreciate all the time tonight, and I'm excited to hear from the panelists.
Yeah, I agree with everything Matt well said. I feel a little bit inadequate after listening to Denise and Christina of all that you've achieved. So you're right, Matt. The students are going to get a bunch of really good insights and information tonight. And I'm sure both of these alum are willing to connect afterwards at a later point as well. I know, Christina, we lean on you quite heavily. So if you did want to reach out, I'm sure they'd be open to that if we did it in a polite and professional way. So with that, thank you so much for attending. Students, thanks so much for attending. And I'll pass it back to Linda. Do you want to go for it? Thank you.
Sure. Sounds good. Well, Christina and Denise, we were going to have Christina kind of be our moderator and panelist at the same time. And I'm wondering if you still like that idea where we just can talk, Christina, like, because I
have some questions that I can start with.
Perfect.
It's all on me now. I got you. I got you.
We'll talk back and forth. I didn't mention actually that I was a student manager. That's how I learned my Monogram. Denise, I like how you take credit for the national championship team 3 years after you. And I like to do the same thing because I was also a women's lacrosse player, but when it was a club sport. And as a leader, I've learned for 30 years, I've become a leader, that leadership is my skill. I was a better leader than I was athlete. And so I organized uniforms and tournaments and a coach. And so I like to take credit for Notre Dame's women's lacrosse program going varsity.
Look at us.
Yes. But interesting, as a manager, as you all probably know, a lot of shit rolls downhill, if I could say that. And in doing research for tonight's panel, Denise, I read that you started out as what they called secretary in Forbes. I think they called you a secretary. And funny enough, Brooks also had an article that said, my first job, I worked for the Bulls, and it was cool. I had a Bulls business card, but I was selling bathroom mats. So I think we all kind of started at the bottom. So can you talk a little bit about starting at the bottom and where your athletic kind of skills and training contributed to your desire to do hard work to get ahead?
Yeah. I spend as much time as I possibly can talking to students, student athletes. I don't have children of my own. I have a happy 21-year marriage, but just kids were never part of what I wanted to have be part of that equation. So managing a husband's enough. So I give back by talking to my friends' kids and certainly going to different colleges and talking to the students. But student athletes, it's like my favorite conversation in the world. And the most pervasive thing that I hear from you all is the stress and the anxiety that you don't have an internship, you don't have time. And all I could think of is I knew those kids in school who used to go around saying they finished their test early, or they already studied 2 days in advance for the test. And like those people always drove me crazy because it's like, don't let anyone get in your head. You are your own competition and you will be fine. And when I think about like how I got my foot in the door, it was by leveraging my personality, the strengths that I had, my competitiveness, my tireless work ethic. And I pounded the pavement until I just got my foot in the door. And then once you do that, you're gonna be fine. So stop stressing out, stop the anxiety. Everything's gonna work out. It always does. You will have moments early in your career where you say, holy shit, I went to Notre Dame and I'm getting yelled at because I didn't staple something correctly. That happened to me. And it will be mistakes along the way, but like that's part of it. That's part of the whole experience. And so, yeah, my first year out of college, I had a temp job at an advertising agency called now Initiative Media. And I was Kathy Sakata's secretary. She was as mean as they come. I spent a lot of days crying in the bathroom and wondering like what I had done to my career as my friends were kind of getting other jobs that looked sexier, things like NBC, and I was not doing that. But you know, you just start doing the work. Like you just get in, get your foot in the door. You know that's not going to be your end of game job. You just make a good impression and start, to Matt's point, networking your tail off. And, you know, I always kept my eye on the prize, which is the job at hand, and never let that be secondary to my networking, because you don't want to be this person who's all about you and trying to find the next job at the sacrifice of the current job. So I would do lunches or coffees or drinks and just start to build my network. And you know, Christina, I'm sure you have a parallel story, but you know, that's where it all begins. I never had to put my resume out there to get a job after that first time because of the network I built and the people. And I was unabashed about it. And you can do it on brand for you, because sometimes when I say these things like, you know, make sure you're linking in, make sure you're talking, when your parents say, I have a friend of a friend of a friend, and you're like, oh, Dad, just do it, because it's going to be 2 minutes of agony, but potentially for a job. And so the good people are willing to help, and more people are willing to do that. So just, I would say, you know, really, it's about leveraging that network. That's why I'm so proud of the university for doing this, because you're starting early, much earlier than I did. So Christina, I don't know if you have a parallel universe, or did you start from a glorious position at NBC?
No, in fact, you know, not from, you know, I took the job at a school that was recruiting on campus because it was the easiest thing, but it was technology sales and it was a great job, but I wanted to be in sports. And you know, you have to sacrifice if you want to be in the media industry or the sports industry, or if you want a job that everybody else wants, you sacrifice a little bit. And you all know about sacrifice. You're sacrificing your time to go to practice. You're sacrificing your ego to be yelled at by your coach. You're sacrificing a ton. And I would say that builds character in a way that a lot of your competition, I guess the early generation, early career employees, a lot of them come in entitled because they went to great schools or they have the contacts or whatever it is, and they come in and they just don't work hard. So I think working hard is one of the core tenets that you bring to a job. But the one other thing I'll say is I talk to a lot of student athletes and they say, you know, I don't have the internship, but I can multitask. I'm a team player, I'm a leader, and all those things are great. But here's the one quality that you have that I will tell you most other stars don't have. And that is the ability to be coached, the desire to be coached. And so Denise talks about like stapling on the wrong side. And most of us as like student athletes, you take that advice and you do it the way that your coach tells you to do it until you know a better way. And what I would say, you know, I remember I had a star on my team, just a superstar, and she had VP level, 10 or 15 years of experience, and she just couldn't take feedback. She just couldn't, because she was perfect all the time and she wanted to be perfect all the time. And every time I gave her feedback, she just didn't hear me. She couldn't hear it. And so I always tell the student athletes, like, if you could go in and say, how could I be better? How could I do better? Which is what you do. You win a game and you celebrate for like 2 minutes. And then you're like, okay, what do I have to do better next time? I think that is key. But we all started. My first job in sports, the NBC producer said, do you really want this job? You're going to be fetching water. And I was like, yes, and I will fetch water better than anyone else. And I did. And
that's right. Yeah, and then the coachable part is so funny because you could go on and on and on about the analogies of the experience you're all getting now on the court, on the field, in the pool, how it can translate into business. And it is a 1-to-1 ratio. And so you are leaps and bounds ahead of the game. I promise you are. And to Christina's point, I always think about 3 things. It's the qualities coming out of school are willingness to work hard, kind of that competitive spirit, like you're going to win, and then coachability. Because, I think younger generations, whether rightly or wrongly, gets this bad rap about entitlement, and you've all heard or been accused of the narrative, but not for athletes. And I really believe that you're completely coachable. You have to be in order to kind of get out of your own way. And the only other build I'd do, and it's going to help later in life, but a lot of times, and maybe hopefully you can relate to this a little bit, it's so easy to get into your own head, whether it's, if you didn't make the right play, or even if you're in a conversation with a friend or a partner and you feel like you said the wrong thing, you can be consumed in that narrative in your head, and it can sacrifice your own success. In business, you have 25 opportunities a day to be hypercritical of yourself and bring it home, piss off your spouse by talking about it all night, and go back into work the next day with your head down and your tail between your legs. What I tell people is, the person who you feel like you didn't do a good job of, or that maybe wasn't as impressed, or maybe you said the wrong word, or your vocabulary wasn't as strong, they're going home, they're feeding their kids, they're putting their mother in a nursing home. People's lives are rich and full, and bring on this pandemic, and it's been triple-fold, right? They're not thinking about you. So get out of your own way, get past it. And I think kind of that coachability comes hand in glove with the ability to coach yourself to get past those negative situations and move on. And then for this group, you're really not going to feel great about yourself until you put a win on the board. And that's the next game. So set yourself up for the next game, the next big win. And that's how you start to catapult your career. You put a bunch of wins on the board that you can point to and say, look at for your own confidence, or for something to point to say, like, I want the next job. So I think it's just a hugely important point that Christina brings up.
So Denise, you were a marketing major and you are in marketing, and you've said you knew you wanted to be a CMO. But sometimes the path doesn't go that way. And I'll even throw in your stint at TDA was finance. And I know from working in the finance industry that you have to have credibility in that space. So how did you really figure out what you wanted to do while you were in college? And then how did you pivot, even if you were in the function that you wanted to be, but then by working in a different industry where maybe you didn't have as much experience in the finance industry?
Yeah. I'd say, I think I was really lucky that I knew at least the field I wanted to get into. I think it's hard if you graduate and you just haven't done an accountant, an economist, a marketer. Yeah, I think that's really challenging. So the task in college, I think, is just to hone in on a field. And within that field, you're never going to know what exactly you want to do. I had no idea all the jobs to be had in marketing. There's so many that you could be creative, you could be research, you could be analytical, you could do anything. And so that's where, just get your foot in the door, even as an admin. And then you start to accumulate experiences and knowledge about where in that field you gravitate towards based on your likes and dislikes. And so that's really how you start to kind of build upon your own career. And I would say for me, I got on this career path that was pretty specific. It was media buying. So you see your ads on TikTok or Instagram, I was the one placing those ads. So that's all I did was buy the media, negotiate the rate, and put the ads in the right place to reach the right customer at the right time. So I did that for maybe the first 8-9 years. And during that time, I thought the ultimate aspiration for me was to get the biggest job in that vertical, which was a media director. And it was probably about that time, 8 years in, when I said, well, why stop there? The clients that are coming in to tell me I want to buy ads on Snapchat and Instagram, they have bigger jobs, they lead bigger teams. And that was when I realized that, and Christina, you kind of said it, you said something about being a better leader than an athlete. I realized my passion was on leading. And so I wanted to lead big teams within the field of marketing. And that's what I was missing doing this very narrow sliver of a job. And it took me, like I said, 8 years. God willing, it's a long life. You got time. But once I realized I wanted the biggest stage to play on, and by the way, preceding this, I realized this had been a bit of a wayfinding mechanism for me. I could have gone to Bowdoin and played D3. I chose to go to Notre Dame and play D1. And I had my first job. I could have gone to a small agency. I went to a big agency. So it became this really comforting device for me to know that this is, I guess, how I'm going to make decisions in my life. And so for me, the biggest job was chief marketing officer. And so, in my late 20s, early 30s, I said, by the time I'm 40, I want to be a little weldy in the corner. I decided that that's the job I wanted. And I began to build a network of people that would tell me, what are the experiences I need to accumulate in order to get there? And that became my path. And so, Christina, to your point about then switching industries, I spent 11 years in financial services, and now I'm in music and entertainment. So the jump into financial services was new, and the jump into entertainment was even newer. I've only been in this job for a little over a year. And that comes down to a couple things. From a marketing perspective, it's all about the customer and understanding what they need. And that doesn't discriminate across category. So my skill set is understanding customer needs, being wildly curious about how to reach them, compel them to buy your product, to be really conversant in all the ways to reach them, and to be creative and innovative about new ways to connect with that audience. I can do that in any industry. And so that was how I connected the dots to jump to where I wanted to go. And it was probably more prevalent for this last jump I took, because the first jump, my client, I was in an agency and my client was TD Bank, and we formed a really good relationship. And ultimately I went to go work for him. And then I went to the sister company, TD Ameritrade. And that was all about kind of career development within a company. And that's when I got my CMO title, which I had set for 40, but I got it at 42. So that was okay too. And then when I decided that I had spent, a lot of time as CMO at TD for 5.5 years, and it was time to go, I had, the second you get a C in your title, you get a lot of really cool calls, and whether you're good or not, it doesn't matter. It's just that they want to call CMOs, which is great. But I was telling the recruiters that I want to be outside of financial services. And so, if Under Armour or NFL or, the US Soccer, whoever's looking for, like in that category, connect me with those people. And then this call came, SiriusXM and Pandora. They had just bought Pandora, and they needed a leader who could merge teams from Oakland, California and New York, figure out the synergies, how to bring these teams together, answer the question if the brands should come together or should the brands remain distinct and separate. And they wanted me because I understood audiences, I understood teams and how to bring teams together. So I never would have expected that to play back in my pursuit of a job I really wanted, the team aspect. But it was part of my narrative. It was part of my story. And they saw that in me, and I was able to get this job. And I'm very grateful that I get to work for a very cool company now.
Denise, I threatening to Matt and James, one day they'll send some my way. I'm going to write a book about finding jobs. And one of the things I talk about a lot is function and industry. And so early on, as much as I thought I wanted to be in the sports industry, and that was all that mattered to me, I thought I wanted to do sports events, I wound up doing sports marketing. And what I learned was I really liked the marketing better, right? Because as a female in a sports agency, I worked for SFX back in the day, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was a talent agency. All the guys were working on the big properties, the big athletes, and they stuck me on some of the women's stuff. Actually, I worked on the Women's World Cup soccer team when they first won the World Cup, but I worked on Little League Baseball, and I did this campaign with Stouffer's, and the campaign, and they wanted to sell family style lasagnas, family lasagnas, and they had a great story. They were like, mom is out on the baseball field until 6:30. You get home at 7 o'clock, and normally you just go through the drive-through. And mom doesn't feel great about that. And instead, you could get home, shove a frozen pizza or a frozen lasagna in the oven, throw a bag of salad in a bowl, let the kids shower, do homework while it's cooking, and then eat a family meal. And I was like, oh my God, you're solving everyone's problems, right? You're solving mom's problems for feeling guilty and not having a good meal. You're solving the kids' problems for having, nutrition. You're getting the homework done, and Stouffer's gets to sell more lasagna too. And I realized marketing is what I really cared about, not necessarily being close to sports. And people will look at my LinkedIn and say, oh, how did you go from video games to news? And it's like, well, no, you're missing the connection of marketing, right? And so I tell people you can stay in the same industry. Like you can go from, marketing to research to, I was in media doing marketing, and now I'm doing transformation. So it's a little different. But thinking about function and industry and kind of settling on which of those are important to you and then how you're pursuing it. But I think it's funny you talk about Bowdoin as well, because one question I always ask all of my interviewees, and not just athletes, but I want to get to know them. So I ask them, what sport, in what market, and what position would you play, right? If you were a professional athlete. And from that, I can see if you want to be a big fish in a big pond, in a little pond. I always said, when I was first asked that question, I said I wanted to be a catcher in Milwaukee, because I like calling the shots without necessarily being the star. And the catcher is typically someone behind the plate that, might be the person who maybe knows the most. I don't want to say is the smartest on the field, but really knows the most, calls the shots, calls the plays. And then I like being a big fish in a small pond. And so that would be my answer. And I think when you ask someone, questions outside of the job that they did, you could find out what kind of team player they can be, and if it's a good fit.
Yeah. It's so funny to say it, because, one of the things that I think about is, I think I show up at work very much consistent with the athlete I was on the field. And, I was a more of like a cheerleader type, like, we can do this, come on team type of personality. And I worked harder than anybody, but I didn't necessarily personally get the impact, but I helped the team. And so, like, I always think, so when I think about my experience at TD Ameritrade, I really think the best thing I did there, and you're so sweet to say that I got that accolade about CMO of the year, I got it because I built the best team. There's no question about it. So good that I was literally able to leave there so easily, have a successor step into place, have all my old direct reports call me a year later and tell me what a good job he's doing and how thankful they are that I groomed him. Like, it's like, that is the most satisfying thing. And that's funny, because like in your career, like early days, your jobs are going to be more industrious and tactical. And I've never felt more satisfied than when I was an assistant media buyer making $19,000, and I would have a stack of things to negotiate. And at the end of the day, the stack was gone, like literally back in the paper days. And I was so fulfilled because it was tangible. I could look at it. I knew what I did. And now, like, this is the intangible, but it's like I groomed a successor. It's so different, and it's really important. And I like to talk about this too with athletes, because it's so easy in sports to know you either win or you lose. It's like there's your benchmark. You have to find what's going to be your own benchmark as you go in your career. Like, what's going to give you satisfaction. So, like, how are you going to grade your day? And be planful about that. And one of the things that is going to happen a lot is you're going to get into meetings, and you're going to read the room, and you'll have a role or you won't have a role, but you'll walk away and say, okay, I think that meeting went well, and I think I did okay. And it's so gray. So what I either do personally or I like to do for my teams is define the win. So in some cases, I will say, we're going to this meeting with the CEO, and he could be having a really crappy day. We don't know. But ultimately, we just want the work to go to the next to be executed. So what is a win? A win is to get in and get out and have the plan approved. Hard stop. If you're asked a ton of questions, if you're criticized, we'll take the learning, but a win is getting in and getting out. Like, and sometimes the win is you want this person to ask 45 questions because it means you conjured up the right conversation. And sometimes it's the opposite. So for yourself, you define what's going to gratify you, define what the win is. And as you lead teams, do it for them.
I think we're so the same person, Denise, really.
We're probably all the same person. I hope.
I say, what's the desired outcome? And in sales, a lot of the times the desired outcome is to get the next meeting. People don't understand that. I bring it down to kind of your level. And I say, when you want a first date, because a lot of the times people are like, oh, we want the sale. And I'm like, well, when you want a first date, you want to get married? Like, what's the desired outcome of the first date? It's not to get married. It's to figure out if you want, get another date, to get the second date. But the best type of meetings, whenever I'm like, what's the desired outcome? And people are like, just to get out of the meeting unscathed, right? Like, no scars, just go in, say what you need to say and get out, right? And that's usually with another executive.
Absolutely.
The other thing is I often say too, the mark of leadership, a true mark of leadership is when you're no longer needed. And that's, you just said, Denise, you were so gratified you left and the team kind of operated without you. And a lot of people that don't have the confidence of athletes, they need to be needed. But if any of you have been a team captain in high school or you're a team captain now, and your coach isn't there and you define a certain culture, certain work ethic, certain practice exercises or drills, and then the day that you're late and your team is still doing those things, you know that you're a good leader, right? That's the mark of leadership. And it carries across in business as well, for sure. For sure. I remember my first maternity leave, I went out and they called me like every single day. And I was like, crap, I have not done a good job, right? Like it didn't feel good to be needed in that space. You wanted the team to operate on its own and it wasn't. So I realized I wasn't, I needed to do something different if they couldn't operate without me. So trying to be not needed. And it's the funniest thing because like once you're not needed, you're not needed. But what business is move on and build something else in your current role. I have more questions, but do any of you have questions for Denise?
I hope so. Is everyone's like stressed out about the internship thing, or I make that up?
I have a question if you don't mind.
Great.
Graduating from like one of the better schools in the country, if not the world, like how did you have the patience to be like, I know I'm going to make it one day, but I'm going to start out in this kind of lesser role than a lot of your classmates or friends?
Yeah. I always knew I'd do something good. Like think about your life. Like, do you ever not get what you want? Like, it sounds cocky, right? I don't say that really out loud and I know I'm being recorded, but it's like, I wanted to do well in high school and make the high honor roll. And I did, I wanted to be the captain of the high school. I did and so and now, by the way, I had a ton of screw ups, I got caught drinking, all that stuff. But like, if you just focus on how you have done so much already to get to this position, it's just pure confidence to know it's going to benefit you later. Like, you're Jack Sheehan, you're not going to be a loser with some hourly job. You're gonna do well. Like you just know you will. It is that for me. I don't know, Christina. What do you think?
I came out of business school, so I went into business school in technology sales. So I was making a nice salary. And when I came out of business school, I was in a sports marketing firm making nothing. So I made less coming out with my MBA. And what I realized, especially if you want to get into the media or entertainment sports industry, and we'll ask Brooks about it too, is, in the beginning, you kind of have to sacrifice and you watch all your friends. First of all, they're all getting jobs now because they had internships and they're getting offers, right? Meanwhile, I didn't have an offer from business school until graduation weekend. And I coach people all the time because entertainment is just in time hiring. But what I knew is I might've been taking less salary and I was, stressing about the job. But within 5 years, I was making the same, if not more, than my friends who took the easy way out, taking a consulting job or taking more money or moving with their friends. And I was in an industry and in a job that I loved, right? And so 5 years later, they're like, oh, I have to go to do this. And then 10 years later, they were like, now I'm screwed. I can't get out of what I'm doing. And when you do something that you love to do and you kind of sacrifice in the beginning, I think, it pays dividends in the years to come. Brooks, I let them know that you sold bathroom ads as your first job, which was, cool company, not the coolest job.
No.
What would you say about sacrificing early on?
And first of all, my apologies. I had a time screw up. So apologize to everyone for being here late. I wish I had a better excuse than that. Like something major happened or we're making a major trade, but that's not the case. I just had a time screw up. I did. I started as an intern with the Bulls and my story is pretty interesting because when I was a senior going into the spring, I really had nothing going on because every summer I spent it on campus. So there were no jobs. I interned at a steel company that was in South Bend, but really didn't have any experience. I was all set to go to grad school and see where it took me, but I always knew I wanted to be in sports. So when the opportunity came up, I turned down grad school. I was an intern making $800 a month, selling ads in bathrooms. So, for you guys, you're all a lot smarter than I am. So you'll have less problems than I will. But I like to say that my career truly did start in the shitter because I was working in selling ads for bathrooms at this new building called the United Center. But I loved it. And what was interesting is I was considered in the marketing and sales department of the Bulls. And every time I got together with my buddies who one ended up working for either Dean Witter or Morgan Stanley right out of school. They were working 80 hours a week. They were making significantly more money than I am at the time. But everyone wanted to talk about my job. Everyone wanted. So it was, being in sports was sexy back then. It was sexier when a guy named Michael Jordan came back. And, for those of you who your first sense of Jordan world was watching The Last Dance, I lived that. I got to live that. And it was something that was incredible. You can never pay for it. Now, to the credit of my buddies, who I'm still very close with today, who went into investment banking, I'm sure, their overall net worth has an extra zero on it compared to mine. But life experiences are really important. And I think that's where you were going with that question is, if sports is of interest, I always just kind of followed the passion. My passion was basketball, but when the guy that owns the basketball team also owns the baseball team, you can make a lot more money to go work for the baseball team. Your passion becomes baseball. But it is, I remember my mom had, and I'm going to sound like the old Notre Dame guy here, but my mom had a dance and gymnastics gym and a dance studio attached to our house. So I grew up with leotards, and every girl that I went to grade school with was at my house. And when you are in grade school, you think it's the worst thing in the world. When you get to high school, it's not that bad. But she did that for 52 years, and her one piece of advice was, follow what you love, and the money will follow. And that's been luckily the case for me. Hopefully that's what you guys were talking about, because
but definitely don't stress about not having the job, because it takes years to build the network that we've talked about, your toolkit of all the things you learn along the way, and your relationships. Brooks and Denise, what do you look for in when you hire someone, both at the junior level and a little bit more senior? What are some of the qualities?
Brooks, keep going. I've been filling the time without you.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll give you a story, and none of you know this person. Mike Bray calls me up and says, Brooks, I've got a guy for you. This kid is awesome. He's our head manager. He's terrific. Can you find him something? He really wants to be in sports. We love this kid. Just does a terrific job. Okay. I don't remember the kid's name. Obviously didn't hire him. He came walking in. Okay. And he sits there, and I'm sitting, and I'm like, hey man, what's up? Tell me what's going on with the team. That he came, his suit looked great. His knot was perfect. And he led off by saying he wants something along this line. Hi, I'm Adam. Let's say his name was Adam. I'm Adam, and I'm the manager for the Notre Dame basketball team. I think I would be qualified. He started reading. He had prepped, and I'm like, bro, put that down. Just tell me about you, because one of the things I love, and I will admit, now I haven't done the intro, so I have no idea who my audience is, but I will admit this publicly, is I am biased towards athletes, because athletes have had to compete. Athletes have lost and had to get back up. In sports, even on the business side, unless you're going to go work for a conference or go work for a league, there's winning and losing. Conferences and the leagues go 500 every year. So they're fine. I have a tendency to like people who will come in and look at me and have a conversation and sell themselves, as opposed to what was on whatever sheet of paper Adam was reading off of. I knew within like 2 minutes I wasn't hiring Adam. There's no way. And all I kept thinking about is, how am I going to tell Coach Bray that there's no way I'm hiring his guy? So what do I look for? I look for somebody who can come in, hold a conversation, can be themselves, isn't afraid to compete. And, I could not tell you the majors of any of the people that work for me or any of the people that I hired, because I'm looking person first, because the reality is in sports, I also love this. I love the people that come into the White Sox or back in my days with the Bulls, they come in and, they were top of their class in school. And, how do I be you? How do I should be you within a few years, just not necessarily how it works. And, I really respect the people that come in that I know want to be me, but are also willing to put the work in that it takes to learn what it takes to sit in my chair. And, I have my favorites of people. One of my favorites was a Northern Illinois baseball player. And, he one of his things, he said, "Hey man, I lost a lot on the field, so I'm not afraid to have anybody tell me no." And he started with us, ended up getting a job that's like paying him triple. And he had the it. I encourage all of you to figure out how to get the it, because if you can go in and sell yourself, you're giving yourself a chance. And if someone says to you, "Well, I noticed that your GPA in your core courses is only a 3.3," you don't want to work for that guy or girl anyway.
I love that. Yeah, I would just add, two things, because I couldn't agree with everything you said more. It's all about, I know within a few minutes too. And that's not to put pressure on all of you that the first few minutes is make or break, but it's pretty easy to tell when you've got chemistry and if someone's, going to be someone you want in your team. So I would say that sometimes the sport and the interests that you have, maybe the bulk of your resume coming out of school, and it's also the most valuable thing. It's always the only thing that people can connect on at a very personal level, which is much deeper than trying to pretend that you learned so much in an internship for 3 months one summer. Even in my career now, when I was at TD Ameritrade, my CEO was, one of those guys you look up to, and he's, older, white hair, intimidating, sitting in a boardroom. And all of a sudden I worked there and for a few years now I'm working directly for him, but he played D1 college hockey at Cornell. And when I went to my first board meeting, and talk about intimidating, and it is this very, austere, male dominated room. And I got introduced before I had to give my presentation as she played D1 soccer at Notre Dame. And immediately, the room warmed up to me. And the interesting thing about it is that when I told that story to my girlfriends, they were pissed. They were like, you're a great marketer. You're smart. And all he sees in you is that you played soccer at Notre Dame. And to that I say, hell yeah. Give me a break. If you're a victim about not being presented as this well-rounded person, I obviously am being presented as well-rounded. I'm in the boardroom, And so I would just say, don't forget how important what you're doing right now is on that resume. And it's just really critical for that connection point. And the only other thing I'd say is, the thing I also look for is preparedness. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I will give my time to any student at any point for advice. But when they don't come prepared, they put the burden on me, that's the non-starter for me. So just be prepared to have, I just have 2 things I have on my mind that I want to ask you about, in and out. And you can take an hour of my time if you have 5 things, but just be prepared.
Absolutely. Let's talk COVID for 1 second. how has COVID changed? Well, Brooks, your business, right? Your business is the fan experience. The fans have had a tough time, with social distancing. Now, originally starting this season without fans, then some fans getting there. How has COVID changed your business and your life?
Well, COVID sucks, as we all know. For those of you who don't know, I have a freshman that's at Notre Dame, and the freshman experience just stinks for her compared to, I think, what all of us know. And for baseball, obviously we went from 162 games down to 60 games with a lot of uncertainty, no fans. Lost 10, each club lost tens of millions of dollars, some over $100 million, because we had 60 games. It's been very challenging, but luckily, I have an amazing owner who has been doing this for a long time and has been really great to our employees. He's been great to our players. We have an up and coming team. I don't know if anybody's a baseball fan on here, but we have an up and coming interesting team that's heading into a window that this would be a really, really strong ramp up time for us from a revenue perspective and a marketing perspective. So it has really hit us. And what we hope is that there's going to be some back and forth here in the coming month with our Players Association. Our Arizona is not really a great place to be heading in 3 weeks for spring training. So we'll see how that plays itself out. But if there's one thing it has taught me is that, the kind of old school way of always doing things, we have to be more flexible than ever. And we have to treat our clients, our stakeholders, whether it's sponsors, season ticket holders, with a long view. There's some teams in Major League Baseball that are not taking that long view, and it's biting them already. So we are taking a very long view as it relates to COVID, and hopefully by this summer, everyone is vaccinated. Everyone can get back to CJ's Pub without any worries, and people can get back into baseball games. And hopefully you got that CJ's Pub reference.
Is CJ still there? Is it still a cool place to go though? I don't know.
No. It's a different place. It's not really
Right?
anymore. Yeah, they moved it down the block. Brooks, just following up on that real quick. In an article I read, it talked, one of your clients, Millicor's client, talked about your partnership, right? That you really believe, and Denise was talking earlier in marketing about how she really understands the consumer. How has kind of establishing the partnerships, real relationships pre-COVID helped during a crisis time like this?
It's invaluable. You guys, if there's one thing, I think my theme has been, establish that relationship from the get-go. Denise made a really good point about, when we mentor people or when younger people talk to us, it's such a turnoff when, they expect us to do all the talking. Preparedness is that first step in creating a relationship. There are a number of young people that I'll talk to and help with their careers, and it's smart relationship building. When we approach a sponsorship, like we were talking about, we want to create a relationship. It's really hard to tell a friend no than it is to someone who just is maybe a business acquaintance. So as you create relationships, you never know when you're going to see them down the road again. So from a sponsorship perspective, we've always made it a priority to service our sponsors better than everybody. And we've been through successful seasons by the Blackhawks while we've been bad. Obviously, the Cubs had a very good run. Hopefully that's ending. Sorry if anybody's a Cubs fan. And we've had to nurture those relationships, and those relationships have helped us in COVID better than some of our other people that are dealing with the same across baseball and across the league. Very important to build strong relationships, sometimes even if you don't want to.
I think same could be said of Notre Dame. If you look at, how the administration came in and asked for trust and transparency, and Father Jenkins had an incident and he said, I'm wrong, right? I apologize. And I think the relationship maintained his integrity throughout. Again, I'm just going to throw it back to you guys as we can continue the conversation. Do any of you have additional questions?
I have this is like high level, very broad question that you've obviously touched on a little bit, but if each of you could kind of share maybe throughout your career something that you found the most fulfilling or maybe your favorite part, and then on the other side of that same coin, like what has been the most challenging or difficult?
Denise, you're up.
Okay. Thanks, Olivia. So I would say the most challenging is the one that's freshest in my mind. When I was working at LL Bean as the advertising manager, I thought I had landed my kind of dream. And live in Maine, can work for a huge national brand. I'm the advertising manager, 2 steps from the CMO. And then my boss got fired in glorious fashion by the CMO. And then I realized that the CMO loved to fire people, and that I was in his line of sight. After about a year there, one day I was reading Adweek and I saw a job description in the Help Wanted, and it was my job. And so I got out of there, but it was really, really, really bruising to my ego. And took me a while. Actually, I can give you both the good and the bad, because it's all one story. I hadn't even thought of the good until right now, because there's tons of like happy moments. But people will say in your career, oh, don't worry, they'll come back to bite them. They'll get theirs, because this person was really, really like not a good person. And so I left LL Bean. That next day, I went to lunch with somebody who ran the advertising agency in town, and I told him that this had happened to me. I was all down in the dumps, and he's like, well, why do you think he doesn't like you? And I said, well, he says he thinks I get by on my personality more than my brain. And this gentleman said to me, who cares? That's great. And I was like, oh, really? And he hired me. So I had a job the next day. That was in 1998. In 2019, my friend became the CEO of LL Bean and fired that CMO because of me. So it came back a lot later, but he was able to sit down with them and say, you've not been a good person, and you actually were mean to my friend back about a decade ago, and you're no longer with the company. So Olivia, people will be mean to you. It will happen. Have confidence and faith in yourself. And it always comes back to bite them. It always does.
For you, if you're that person.
Yes.
Don't be that person.
No.
Don't be a jerk.
No one here is going to be that person. You can tell it's good karma, good energy.
Brooks?
Yeah, my first boss at the Bulls always used to say, hey, remember, who you see on the way up, you could see on the way down if you don't treat them well on the way up. So keep that in mind. I mean, I have been fortunate enough to work for the Bulls and Michael Jordan and win 3 championships. Worked for the White Sox in 2005 when they broke an 88-year drought to win the World Series. Those are amazing. Sharing those experiences with the people you work with or your family, it's really hard to top any of that. I've met commissioners and Hall of Famers and people I idolized, growing up. Dr. J was my guy growing up, and I met him and Magic Johnson and all these. Those are all terrific experiences. But I'll give you, and I apologize because this story could get a little long, but it's worth it. It's my best Michael Jordan story. Is everybody okay with the Jordan story? Okay. All right. So I'm relatively young. I was promoted out of my selling ads in the bathrooms And I was selling the preseason games, and we had a preseason game in Memphis, Tennessee. And so we were playing at the Pyramid, and the title sponsor was AutoZone, who's based out of Memphis. And they had called the day before and said, hey, we are hosting a family, and it's a kid that's like 9 years old who's terminally ill. He's got maybe 3 months to live. What are the chances of getting Michael Jordan to come to that room to say hello to him? And this is, you don't make those asks. You just don't make the ask. But it's a heart-tugging situation. So I'm like, look, it's probably a no, but let me see what I can do. I'll give it a shot. So I get to the plane the next day, and it is dead silent. Okay, it's dead silent. Michael and Phil were at each other's throats from practice that morning. I mean, I walked into the airport hangar area. You could cut the tension with a knife. Nobody was talking. And so I'm like, damn, how am I going to get Michael to how can I even ask him? Well, we get on the plane, and you sit on the plane for a while. It's a private plane. And where I'm sitting, kind of kitty corner back from me, is it's almost like a table. And Michael used to like to play cards there. So he keeps telling the waitress that is on the plane to keep bringing him vodka cranberries. And the reason he was doing it, because he knew Phil sat right by where they served the food in the bar, and Phil paid attention to it. So Michael was sucking down drinks, like it was a, Friday night of a football, Saturday of a football weekend. And all of a sudden I see Phil get up, and Phil lumbers back, and I see him coming on the plane, and a shouting match ensues. Now I might be able to reach back and touch this shouting match. That's how close I was to this shouting match between Phil and Michael. So I'm still thinking, there's no way. I've got a hammered Jordan. No way am I going to be able to get him to do this. So we get to the Pyramid in Memphis, and I go in and I see the client, and I meet the kid and the kid's family. And, the CEO of AutoZone's like, hey, any shot? What? I'm like, I doubt it. I'll go in there and I'll try right now. So I walk in, and Michael's kind of tucked in a corner, and I'm like, hey, MJ, here's the situation. There is a kid 2 doors out the door, 2 doors down, 40 feet down, if that, is this family. And he's like, he picks his head up. And hey, can I swear here? Is anybody like anti-swearing? It's not me saying it. It's Michael. Is that okay? All right.
We've already all sweared.
Okay. So he looks up at me, and I mean, did everyone raise their hands? You see The Last Dance? Yeah, I did. Okay. So he looks at me, and he's like, you fucking promised me. You promised me to this family. You don't have the right to promise me. I'm like, whoa. Didn't promise you. We're good. Now I say no. I did not promise you. You fucking promised me. Don't you ever promise me. Get the fuck out of here. Okay. And I'm like, I didn't promise you. Now I had to stand up to Michael before, so it was no big deal. And I'm like, just so you know, I didn't promise you. I made no promises whatsoever. So I turn around and I take a few steps, and all of a sudden, wham, I get hit in the back by a flying shoe from Michael Jordan. And I turn around and I just kind of look at him, and he said, you find me a pot of coffee, I'll do it. So he has to, he's probably starting to feel the effects of the 17 vodka cranberries he drank on the plane. You find me a pot of coffee, done. So I go out and I find our contact at the Pyramid, and I'm like, hey, I need a pot of coffee for Michael Jordan. And she says very quickly, we don't sell coffee here. We don't sell coffee at the Pyramid. I'm like, where's Starbucks? Where's the closest Starbucks? Well, there is like a Starbucks. It might not have been a Starbucks, a couple blocks away. Where are the cabs? I need to go get Michael Jordan coffee. So, go down into the loading dock. I'm walking through the bowels of the Pyramid, and I can't find the loading dock. And I hear these two guys in a side off room, and I walk in, they're maintenance guys. And I walk in, two guys sitting there. Here I am, young guy in a suit. And I asked the question, I'm like, hey guys, where's the loading dock? And they're like, oh, you gotta go out there. And I look over one of their shoulders and there's a coffee maker. It was probably from the 1960s or 70s. It was a piece of crap. I'm like, does that thing make coffee? And they're like, yeah, it makes coffee. I'm like, can you make me a pot of coffee for Michael Jordan? And then these two guys are like, hell no, it's not going to Michael Jordan. I'm like, this is going to Michael Jordan. And I promise you it's going to Michael Jordan. So I'm sitting back there kicking it with these guys for a while. They make me a pot of coffee. I walk in with like styrofoam cups that maybe are the size of Dixie cups, maybe. And I hand it to Michael, and he kind of laughs. He's like, come back in 5 minutes. So I see him, he pours himself a little bit of coffee, come back in 5 minutes. Now I'm fired up. I'm fired up for this kid and fired up for this family. I go get MJ. Now he's in full sweatsuit. All right. You know, he's going to go out and do his warm-ups. And we walk out into the hallway, and he runs a list of explicitives that I couldn't even repeat on here about me. Don't you, on and on and on and on. You know, and he always called me the Notre Dame asshole. Notre Dame asshole. I was like, you know, look, last time I played Carolina, we won. So he absolutely killed me. All right. So then I open the door and Michael walks in, and I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be awful. This is going to be a bad experience. He's in a terrible mood. He turns it on. All right. I mean, it was like you heard angelic, da-da-da. He walks in, he talks to the dad. He sits right down next to the kid, and he's talking to the kid like they've been best friends forever. The little daughter comes over, his little sister's like, you're the Space Jam guy. He's like, yes, I am. I have a daughter about your age. He turns this thing on. There's not a dry eye in the place. I mean, the CEO of AutoZone is crying. You know, he talks to the mom and the dad on the side and tells them how sorry he is and what they're going through, and hopefully their faith will get them through this. And, you know, it's just so hard, and being a dad, and he was amazing. Absolutely amazing. So I'm like, all right, Michael, we got to go. You got to warm up. So, you know, we're in there for, you know, probably like, I said it once, and he's like, hey, Brooks, I'll let you know when we're ready to go. Well, okay. Because he told me, you get me out of there in 5 minutes. You know, all this. So we walk out into the hallway, and, you know, I'm walking, and I'm just, it's like an emotional thing. I'm just stunned by all this. And I'm like, hey, Michael, I got to tell you, that was one of the more incredible things I've ever seen. Thanks for doing it. And he hits me like on the back of the head, and he says, come on, Brooksy, that's what we do. And he was, and, you know, and off he went back into the locker room. So he had to put me through hell. I had to pay the price, but it was one of the most amazing experiences that I've been in, to see what difference that could make to someone. And it just an incredible story. Sorry, it's long, but it's worth it.
That is a great story to end on. Linda, I know we're at time, so I will thank Denise and Brooks for their time and let you close up.
Hey,
Thanks
so much.
Linda, I don't know if you guys have more time on this Zoom, I'm more than happy to stay on and answer any questions, since I was late. If we want to kick Denise off.
I have to finish a board deck, and it's already 9:10. This was so fun, but I got a lot of work to do. But
Yeah, Denise, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Students, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask Brooks before we wrap it up? Because he's been kind enough to offer that.
What was the transition like? I know it was the same owner and same boss, I guess you would say, but what was the transition from basketball to baseball like?
It was pretty easy. I mean, the fundamentals of what I do, you know, from a marketing and revenue perspective, is very much so the same. So I did go to double the games and double the size of the stadium, and outdoor and no clock. So baseball is harder than basketball, but the fundamentals of the business, the relationship building, the selling of season tickets, the broadcasts, connecting with fans, all the sponsorships, all the things that we do, because our business model is revenue is generated, netted of operations, and it's given to the players. Our owner's rich. He doesn't need to have any more money. He just wants to have good baseball teams. So when you work in an environment like that, it makes it a little bit easier. Basketball is much easier than baseball, no doubt about it. But the transition wasn't that hard because it's the same departments that exist. You're just selling a different product, and the transition is getting to understand and know the product. Just if you're going to sell anything, you got to know the product.
Students, I also want to be cognizant of Christina's time because she's been so kind to be our moderator and our panelist. So Christina, please feel free to hop off the call too. I saw your son make a guest appearance there.
Yeah, so I have 4 little boys.
Oh,
Prepared to sing the fight song. He was the oldest, and he's quarantining because he got contact traced.
Oh shoot.
Because everyone else is upstairs. So he's like, look, he's like the scary guy just standing right there because he's got nothing else to do. Like he just wants to be annoying. So I'm good. I'm good. I told him if he stayed in here, he'd have to sing the fight song for everyone. That's why he backed up.
That's right. Exactly. Students, maybe one final question for Brooks, if anybody has anything that they'd like to ask before we wrap this up for the night. And hopefully Christina and Denise were kind enough, Brooks, before you hopped on to say that they'd be happy to connect with the students. If we have some students who have follow-up questions that they aren't thinking of as we're talking, maybe if it would be okay for them to connect with you afterwards.
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Hey, just real quick, just because I see all of you, who are you? What sport do you play? Where do you live? Or maybe where did you live?
I can kick us off. So hi, I'm Olivia. I'm a junior currently, and I'm on the cross country and track team. I'm currently in Chicago suburbs, but on campus, I live in Walsh Hall. So go Wild.
Casey, what about you?
I'm a senior business analytics major. I'm on the cheerleading team, and I'm from Pennsylvania. On campus, I was in Farley Hall, and now I'm off campus as a senior.
Got it. Casey, business analytics in our industry is blowing up. Yep. It really is blowing up.
It is.
Jacob, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm a graduate student, business analytics as well, originally from Pittsburgh, and went to Bucknell before my year here at Notre Dame, and living in the Foundry right now on Eddy Street. So
brilliant. James, what about you? You have the best beard of everybody.
Yeah, well, I actually work here. So I'm the Student Athlete Career Development Program Manager. Thank you, though, for thinking I'm so youthful looking, Brooks. I appreciate that. So I'm sort of the first point of contact for student athletes in terms of life outside of athletics and sports. So,
and you have a killer accent. Where's your accent from?
New Zealand.
Oh, terrific.
Yep.
All right, Lauren, you're the safest of all of us.
I'm a sophomore. I'm from Lamont, Illinois, and I'm on the women's golf team, and I live in McGlynn.
Oh, wait. So I may have met you. Do you live right by Kylie?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I met a golfer one of the first days that I helped move Kylie in. She's in McGlynn, but you guys can't necessarily hang out. Where'd you go to high school?
Bennett Academy.
Oh, you went to Bennett. All right. I have Montini kids, so we won't make fun of Bennett. Jack, what about you?
Jack Sheehan on the baseball team. I'm from New Jersey originally. Grad student here, but I lived in Morrissey for a year and then Kia.
What position?
Pitcher.
What's your best pitch? What's your out pitch?
Changeup.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're a fastball changeup guy.
And slider, yeah.
Do you want to get into baseball? Do you want to work in baseball?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Well, feel free to reach out.
Appreciate
I'll help in any way I can. It's an awesome industry.
Thank you.
And then Matt and Linda, I know you guys, so sorry, don't need your background.
Exactly.
I won't bore you with that. I am a Midwest kid though, so I could listen to the MJ stories all day. But I just a huge thanks to Christina, to Brooks, and to Denise. It always hits me, just the Notre Dame family, the Notre Dame network. And if you looked at these three on LinkedIn, you'd think, oh my gosh, how do I even start a conversation? How do I start this? We're all the same when you break it down, right? And we all have a passion for this place, and it's just incredible with the loaded schedules, as busy as they are. Anytime I reach out in an email, it's 10 minutes later a response. Yep, connect, give my contact, I'm all in. So credit the student athletes for showing up tonight. You could have spent an hour. I don't know where that hour went. That flew by. But I always love doing things like this. I can't wait till we can do it and I'll be sitting in the same room on campus or wherever it might be. But utilize the Monogram Club. We're supporting James and Linda and everything they're doing, and we can play that human LinkedIn game, and that's what it's all about, that 4 for 40, 4 for forever promise. So just thank you to the panelists and for the student athletes for showing up.
Well, on that note, thank you all so much. Christina, thank you for being our amazing moderator and panelist. And Brooks, thanks so much for joining us. And students, as Matt said, thank you for being here tonight. And we look forward to staying connected.